Okay, start with, okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
This is the webinar for how to effectively run your leadership, led by me, Jessica Sun. I'm CEO, and
Hi,
Jessica,
my name
yeah.
is Jessica Yang, and I'm the founder and chairperson of the board of directors for CAST.
And my name is Kevin Fan. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for CAST.
Great.
Wonderful.
All right.
Well, today we wanted to talk with you all a little bit about how you can effectively run your leadership team for CAST. So the first part of our presentation will be about your approach for this process. And then I will talk with you about your approach from knowing your goals, thinking about your people, and forming your vision. And then Kevin, you'll be speaking about.
Oh, I will be speaking about what to do when no leaders step up.
And then finally,
And
Jessica.
then, yes, and then I'll be discussing how to actually pick your officers, like based on like the application interview process once you have interested people, and what to do after you have chosen them.
Yep. So without further ado, the first part of our presentation is about approaching your leadership team. So now you know that you need to form a leadership team. The first thing is to think about your goals. So what is your vision for your branch this year? You want to think about if you are starting a brand new CAST branch, what kind of operations you want to have, how big you want your branch to be this first year, and what kinds of things your team will need to work together to do. For example, if you want to start your very first CAST session in a school, then you'll want people who are comfortable teaching in front of students, people who may be comfortable leading a new club at your school, and also meeting with principals or key stakeholders at your local elementary school. If you're someone who's acquiring a CAST branch, continuing the leadership of an existing and operating branch, then you want to think about the responsibilities that you have in maintaining these operations, maintaining the after-school programs, and also thinking about what big steps you want to take as the leader of your branch this year. So one smart way of thinking about this is using SMART goals. So this acronym stands for S, specific goals that are measurable. That means that you can keep track of them. That are actionable. That means that you know how you can get started and what steps you can take to achieve these goals. They should be relevant. That means that they're relevant for your overall mission of serving students and helping people better learn science. And they should also be time-bound. So that way you can achieve them within specific months or weeks or within the year that you'll be leading your CAST team, or a year or more. The second step is that you should think about your people. So know how many people are currently on your team. When you create a new leadership team, or when you're thinking about restructuring or forming a new team, it's really important that you consider the people who are currently on your team, people who've worked really hard and contributed to making how your CAST branch is today, if you're taking over an existing branch, or people who are your friends, or who are the kinds of people who go to your high school, what they're interested in, what their strengths are. That will help you form an idea of what kind of team you can build based on the people who are around you. You want to consider what their strengths are, whether some people tend to be more punctual, more responsible, some people who are more creative, or who are very mature and professional and feel comfortable giving presentations. Everybody has their special area where they'll be especially capable in contributing. And then people also have areas where they'd be comfortable further developing, or maybe some areas that they'd rather not focus on. So you want to think about what the people who could be on your team, what their areas of strengths are, so that you can best pick people who complement each other. You also want to think about how people work together, because people have different working styles. And as the leader of your CAST team, you have to bring all of these different people together. So you want to think about making sure that the people on your team don't have to be the best of friends, but also make sure that they are able to work together. understand that there are some scenarios that might not work so well, and that you might be very well off if you avoided scenarios that didn't work well, whether it be maybe someone who has a very different goal than your mission, than your goal. Maybe someone who has given a lot to CAST and really wants to do one of a few different things, then you want to try and accommodate that person, perhaps. It's very important in order to get the best outcome where everyone is happy, it's very important to just talk with everyone, talk honestly and frequently and openly. And then finally, just think about how many people you want to be on your team. That kind of goes with knowing your goals, because if you need to be serving a lot of different branches or doing a lot of different CAST programs, if you're if you're one of our larger chapters, then you might want more people on your team. If you're just starting out, maybe if you have a lot of friends who are interested, then you can have a big team. But if not, then it's perfectly okay to have a small, intimate team where everyone knows everyone else, and you just have a few people to be working with since you're just getting started. And then finally, one more thing is to form your vision. So once you know your goals and once you think about your people, then you pretty much have an idea of which direction you want to proceed in order to finalize your team. So think about specifics of how many people, how many top leaders, whether you want just one president or whether you want 2 co-leaders leading your team. You want to think about how many officers. Some ideas include having several vice presidents, some working with operations, some working with schools, some working with new ideas, or maybe you want to have like 1 president, a vice president, a treasurer, or secretary, or some other kind of less formal structure. Make sure that when you form your vision, you strongly consider the people who could possibly be on your team and the goals that you have, the goals that your team working together needs to accomplish. That way you'll be able to have an outcome that works well for everyone. And now for Kevin, finding your leaders.
Kevin, your mic's off.
Sorry about that. As Jess said, you need to consider your goals and your people, but you also need to consider the culture at your school. And sometimes you'll have schools or you'll have years where you'll have a lot of people who want to be leaders, and it won't be difficult to try to find leaders. And sometimes you might have a more shy group of people who are less willing to take on the big responsibilities, and they're more hesitant. They're afraid that they might not be able to handle something as big as CAST. So it's important for you to build their confidence and inspire them to take on leadership roles. Now, as a leader, you need to set the direction of the team to help themselves do the right thing to move forward. So it's important that you encourage your team and empower them to take up more roles. You do this by encouraging them whenever possible. Whenever somebody does something good that you like, you always want to give them a few words of encouragement and try to give them more responsibilities. I remember when I was leading the Northwest branch, it was a difficult time for me to find branch leaders because the Northwest had 3 elementary schools that we catered to, and each elementary, I couldn't be at each elementary school to help lead the sessions, so we needed one person who could be in charge of the materials and the volunteers and all of that to lead that branch. So I complimented my members. I selected members who are probably a little more outgoing and a little more responsible, and I complimented them on those qualities and said, you gotta believe in them. You gotta have them believe in themselves and tell them that they would make good leaders, and you need them to step up to the role as well. Once you encourage them and once they start doing some small things that are successful, they can start taking on bigger responsibilities, and the momentum just builds from there. And I'll pass it off to Jessica again.
All right. So yes, I'm the other Jessica, but okay. So my presentation, my part of the presentation, is going to be how you actually pick your officers if you have enough interest. This is only considering if you have enough people to actually do an application and do interviews. So this applies to the larger branches. I will talk a little bit later about if your branch isn't as large. So for if you, as your branch grows, or if your branch started out as a pretty big branch, sometimes a lot of branches decide to do an application process and then an interview process. If your branch isn't that big, sometimes you just select people based on previous accomplishments. But first, focus on the application interview process. So the application is going to usually be either over Google Forms, so you get an Excel sheet with the answers, or filling out Word docs. I find that filling out Word docs is actually a little bit more useful and a little bit more organized because the Excel sheets can get really jumbled really quickly, especially with long answers. So I prefer sending out one Word doc, asking them to save it and send it back to me with fill it out with their answers. So that's how I prefer running my applications. So actually, to fill out the actual application, I would include things like your name, your grade, contact info of that person, of the applicant, obviously. And then this is a big one that I've found over my years in extracurriculars that this was really informative and really helpful. This question is, please rank your extracurriculars in order of importance to you, including cast. Please be honest. Now, it's easy to ask like, what are your other things, what are your other extracurriculars? But it's a whole other thing to actually ask them to rank their extracurriculars in order of importance, not in the order of the time commitment, but how it actually matters to them. I actually take this into account a decent amount when I'm doing the application because where they rank cast matters. If it's in their top 3, great. If it's in their bottom, it's at the bottom of the list, not so great. And if you just ask them to be honest, usually they will be. I don't find that many people put cast, well, if they're just starting cast, as their #1 priority. If they've been with cast for a couple of years, yes, cast usually #1. But if not, then I appreciate that honesty, and you can tell whether they're being honest or not, especially in the interview. After that question, which is the first question, I ask what is his or her vision for the cast branch. So this question lets me see what they know about cast and what they expect cast to do. Why are they passionate about cast and how do they see it growing at your high school? This is really important to me because it matters in the way like how do you care about cast and how do you see it growing? And if they're motivated and if they see that I can grow a lot, then they will put a lot more time and effort into it, which is very good and what you want in officers. Next, I would ask, why do you think you're most qualified for this position? So obviously this is your standard question, like you want to know why are you qualified for treasurer, why are you qualified for publicity chair, do you have like background in graphic design, stuff like that. So it gives them a chance to say those kinds of things and let you know about that. So that's just a very standard question. But the first two I would highly recommend, the ranking your extracurriculars and the vision question. Those are some things I would definitely include. These are just kind of like a baseline. Definitely go off of this, edit the questions however you want. But those two questions I mentioned first, third question is pretty much mandatory, but you can phrase it however you want. And lastly, I always like to add a question asking, is there anything else you would like to add? So this just gives them a chance to go on about like why they like cast, or if they had any past experiences similar to cast, and how they wanted to add that to the cast experience and stuff like that. Or just simple stuff like go cast, or like I love cast. You know, those are cute little things, and I think it adds a little cute thing to the applications, and sometimes very eye-opening stories. So that's it for the Word application, the actual written application. So for the interview, you do not want to ask the same questions you asked in the application because obviously that would be quite redundant. Instead, I would say that you should ask questions that build off of the questions you asked in the application and address any concerns you had based on their answers in the application. So if you want them to elaborate on something, this is a great time to ask them to elaborate on that. It makes them feel, I find that when I go to interview or when I interview people, if I have actually studied their answers and seen what they had said and talk about it, it's a good feeling for everyone there because they know you studied my answers that I took time into, and I'm answering those questions. I'm glad that you gave me a chance to elaborate. So I find that that's a good thing to do in general. So examples of questions I would ask is to ask about your time commitments with other extracurriculars. So I ask them to rank them, but you can actually ask them about their time commitment, like how much time do these take for you, to be honest, and ask them to be honest about it. Because honestly, the amount of extracurricular plus schoolwork one can do in 1 week is limited. So it's just asking how they distribute their hours among these different extracurriculars. Next, I would ask how they would implement their vision for the CAS branch. It's one thing to say what the vision is, it's a whole other thing to implement it. Of course, I'm not expecting this perfect polished answer as to come from these applicants, but I want an idea. And they're not present either, so it's not like it's their exact duty to implement everything. But I do want to know how they plan to implement the vision for their specific role within the branch. Finally, this is similar to another question, but if you didn't ask it before, asking what experience do you have in the past that would help you in this position is a good one. You know, if they didn't talk about the application, well, maybe they have some experience, and if they don't have experience, it's good to know. It's good to know that they don't. So if they just have some flowery words in the application, it's good to cut through and see if they actually do have experience. All right, so that's the application interview process. Only if you have a large amount of people are interested and need to narrow it down and can't choose yourself. So, oh, and another thing you could do that a lot of other people do that I almost completely slipped my mind is elections. Elections are your standard, typical club way to do things, but within CAS, some CAS members don't actually have clubs. Some CAS members don't actually have clubs at the high schools. So we find that doing the application interview process is way better. Plus, when you interview people, you can get the opinions of people from the national executive team, which includes me, Jess, and Kevin, who are here, and get their opinions. If you do an election, we can't be there, and it's based solely on your members. So if you do elections, I highly recommend that you already have regular weekly meetings so that everyone in the organization gets to know each other very well and knows each other's strengths and weaknesses and knows who would be good for what position. So elections are not as popular within the CAS structure, and applications interviews are very popular, but it's always an option. Okay, so if you do not have a great amount of people who want to apply, then selecting based on previous accomplishments and how you know them is definitely okay too. Sometimes it's appropriate to choose officers based on who is interested and forego the application process completely. But if you do, you have to be careful to choose people who are very responsible. If they're not competing against other people to get an officer position, you have to make sure that they actually want to do it. It's better to have nobody for a position than to have somebody who doesn't want to do it. So one couple of things I consider when you're choosing people who are just interested and not an application process is make sure to see if they're timely on school projects. You've probably known these people in the classroom or known things about them in the classroom. Making sure that they're good students is definitely something that would help. Finally, secondly, you have to make sure that they're interested in the STEM fields. CAS is a STEM organization, and we try to have teachers who are interested in STEM so that they can answer questions that the kids pose honestly and passionately. They also have, like I said before, they should also be interested in the officer position. If they don't want it, don't force it on them. You definitely don't want someone who doesn't want to do it and adds a negative effect and drags your branch down other than lifting it up. So don't do that. Okay, so that is choosing your members after you develop your vision and everything, like Jessa and Kevin have said before. So after you've done that and after you've chosen your officers, now we're on to the point where you're actually running your branch with your chosen officers. So that's pretty exciting that you've made it to this point. So some of the things that I would definitely recommend you do once you have your officers and you're happy with your officer team is to always give your members something to do. So people who feel like they're not contributing something will generally not do as good a job once they actually are given tasks. They're like, oh, I'm finally giving something, I'm finally being paid attention to. I don't care that much about it because obviously they don't care that much about me. That's kind of how I felt at certain points in different organizations. So if you give your members something to do, give them a task, it's definitely a good thing to keep them involved and feel like they're contributing and that they are contributing. It's definitely useful to do that. Finally, not finally, I keep saying finally, not finally. Okay, so secondly, stay organized. People will not follow a disorganized leader. If you don't have your meetings structured, if you don't have your emails in a nice, readable manner, many people will start to kind of back away from placing all of their trust and hope in this new leader. So stay organized and appear professional. That's always something you want to do. Always stay organized and professional. Okay. You also want to stay motivational. You don't want to be like, here's a bunch of deadlines, get them done, or else. You want to keep a positive outlook, and even if deadlines aren't met, you have to keep things in a positive, have to approach things in a positive manner. When they don't go as planned, just ask them why and try to figure out nicely. Don't ever try to be the bad guy and try to be a bad cop or whatever. Just stay a good cop. Honestly, because no one wants to follow someone who feels like they're just being bullied and forced to do things. No one wants to feel like they're being forced to do something. You want to motivate people to do something, that they want to do it themselves to help this wonderful organization that they joined. In addition, always keep a positive tone in your emails. So your emails, it's very easy to give off a negative tone, but it's just as easy to give off a positive tone. And things with like cheers, as Jess always did, cheers, Jessica, something like that. But always like, if you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm always happy to answer your questions, stuff like that. Just keep a positive tone in your emails, and people are more likely to respond positively. Next, always follow up with people on their tasks. Giving deadlines doesn't always mean that they will do them in that time frame. So it's really helpful for me, even I find in my organization, it's very helpful for me to get reminders to do things. So a couple of days before the deadline, ask them if they have worked on this, which days are on the task, and if they need any help. Just being overall a very helpful person will lead to a much better organization. And as a leader, it's very good to be helpful and cheerful. Always stay focused on your vision as well. Refer back to your goals that you made, your SMART goals, and make sure that you're actually staying along the lines with them. And if you ever lose a path, go back to those goals and follow those goals again and restructure where you are. Finally, this is the fun part, you plan parties once in a while. So we try to do annual picnics in CAS. So I know Maryland had one, Virginia had a couple, I think Maryland had a couple actually. And they were very fun. I got to meet people across this, like around the area in that state and say hello and meet people I've only seen in Google Plus Hangouts and stuff. So I don't know, that was very fun. So that's all I have for those two things, how to run your officers after you've chosen them and how to choose your officers. Whew.
Well,
Okay.
Thank you all so much for viewing our webinar. We hope that it's been helpful, and please email us any questions that you have at info@kidsarescientists2.org or visit our website at cas.org. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye.
Have a good day.